My name is Rebecca Goodrich, and I'm a registered dietitian in Los Angeles, California. I am also licensed in Florida and in Alaska. Today, I'm going to be talking about hypertension or high blood pressure. So just to kind of give you, and also I'll be specifically talking about sodium, but just to kind of give you an idea of what hypertension is, what high blood pressure is, kind of think of, your arteries like a hose, right? And the water that's going through the hose is the blood. So there's good blood flow going on in that hose, right? The water, everything is smooth coming out. But let's pretend that you put your foot on top of this hose. What's going to happen? Eventually it's going to burst, right? When there's too much pressure. So we kind of think of the same way with high blood pressure or hypertension. Here are your arteries, the wall of the arteries, and then here's the blood basically flowing to the arteries and putting that pressure in there. And that's what blood pressure is. But when there's too much pressure going on, that's where we start seeing problems. We see hypertension. Now, the issue with hypertension is that it does increase your risk of stroke and also heart attack and also other issues, things like atherosclerosis or narrowing of those arteries, right? And so we want to be very, very cautious of that. And so today we're going to be talking about sodium because, as we know, when there's too much of a sodium intake, that can actually cause high blood pressure, hypertension. So let's get into it. And also, thanks for joining. So sodium, it's more than what is found in food. And basically, sodium is an electrolyte that also functions as a mineral. It helps with normal nerve and muscle function, and so that's why it is essential and why we need it. It also maintains cellular homeostasis, fluid and electrolyte balance, and blood pressure. So yes, we still need sodium. It is maintained by the kidneys. It helps maintain fluid and blood volume, and specifically absorption takes place in the distal small bowel or that small intestine, specifically in the jejunum and in the ileum, and it also takes place in the colon, which is, as we know, the large intestine. So when we talk about daily sodium, we may ask ourselves, how much sodium do I need? What do I need to consume in order for it to, really have this beneficial effect on us that we consider sodium being essential? And so ideally, we don't want to have more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day, possibly even a little less if you can get it around to 1,000 milligrams per day, but 1,500 is safe to say that's ideal. And then when we talk about what's recommended, we really don't want to have more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. Now, get this. This is how much sodium we're actually consuming per day on average. 3,400 milligrams per day. And that's why, according to the CDC, 1 out of every 4 adults has hypertension. And it is called the silent killer, because we don't have any kind of symptoms when there's hypertension present. There may be small, sudden symptoms that we may start seeing, but generally speaking, we don't really know unless we get our blood pressure checked. So that's what brings us down to which foods that are high in sodium, which foods should we really be avoiding, because there are certain foods that can contribute to hypertension. So when we look at this photo here, we see all that yummy stuff, right? We see the French fries, we see the chips, we see what else we got here? We got some pizza, we got some canned soups. So it's not about never consuming these foods. It's about having them in moderation and making it more of a balanced meal, right? So are you gonna have French fries every night? No. Do you wanna start living off of canned soup? No, right? So these are the foods that have a lot of sodium content in them. And yes, that includes organic foods. So a lot of the times I'll hear, well, it's organic, it's healthier for me, right? It's not necessarily true. So it's really important that when you do buy organic foods, whether it be organic, natural, whatever the labels are saying, that you always look at the ingredient list so that you know as a consumer what you're consuming and what's best for you and your health and your medical history. So when we talk about these hidden ingredients, sodium can come in many different forms. And so these are some examples that kind of show you, what are those hidden ingredients? Where do we see sodium in our foods? So things such as sodium chloride, right? Which is what predominantly salt is. It's not just sodium, there's also chloride in there. Baking soda, baking powder, those ingredients as well, they contain sodium. Monosodium glutamate, right? Keyword, sodium. Disodium phosphate, same with that. And yes, even sea salt has sodium in there. And so the thing with sea salt is that they're larger crystals, and so people tend to have lesser amounts of the sea salt. And same with Himalayan salt. And as well as sodium benzoate, right? Sodium. So these are just a couple of ways that we tend to see the sodium hidden in the ingredient list. And when we talk about reading labels, this is so essential, very, very crucial to be aware of. Your daily value, as mentioned previously, is less than 2,300 milligrams a day, right? And 5% or less of sodium per serving is considered a low sodium food, right? So it's that 520 rule. And then anything that's 20% or more per serving on that ingredient list is considered to be a high sodium content food. So you want to pay attention to servings. It's not about eliminating, it's about including everything as a whole and in moderation. And again, as the consumer, knowing what you're consuming. So when we talk about claims, and all these claims, they are adopted from the Food and Drug Administration. And when we talk about the ingredients and we talk about how much of sodium is on a package, it can get so confusing. Some products say salt-free, less sodium, sodium-free, all these different things. And so this is just a good explanation of basically what these labels mean. So salt, sodium-free is when you have 5 milligrams per serving, and that's keyword, per serving. So if you start doubling up on that serving, it can start getting higher and higher in the sodium content. And some food manufacturers, they'll actually intentionally lower the amount of serving per package so that they can include some of these marketing tools. So just again, as the consumer, understand what you're consuming. Very low sodium when there's 35 milligrams or less per serving. Low sodium, 140 milligrams per serving. Reduced sodium, 25% less sodium than that regular product that they had out before. Light in sodium or lightly salted, 50% less sodium than the product. And no salt added, it means no salt was added when the food was being processed, but it may contain a high sodium content. So it was just not added. So sometimes, these can be really great marketing tools, and it's just important to know, what you're having and look at the sodium content so that you're aware. Now, sodium and health concerns. So we did talk a little bit about hypertension, we talked about blood pressure, and like I said, 1 out of every 4 people in the United States is living with hypertension, specifically in adults. And this is a very high number, and so we have to be very, very cautious of how much sodium we're consuming because of this, because hypertension can lead to a stroke, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, decreased blood flow, making the heart pump a lot harder, making that heart weaker, leading to a heart attack. And not only that, but kidney disease. So hypertension is one of the major causes of kidney failure. And that's why it's so very important to pay close attention to how much sodium you're consuming and know that most of your foods can actually prevent hypertension from happening or high blood pressure, which we'll go ahead and get into. So these are some really great alternatives that you can put into your foods to really help lower your blood pressure level and also help prevent hypertension from occurring. So herbs, oregano, basil, thyme, cilantro, dill, spices like turmeric, nutmeg, ginger, saffron, vanilla. All these different herbs and spices can be so beneficial when you're adding things to your meals. Not only is it anti-inflammatory, but again, it can also actually help with increased blood flow. So it's very important to also add these components or ingredients into your meals. And they're very easy to include them. So thank you guys so much for tuning in with me. I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me on radnutrition.health, and as always, I am here to help. Stay healthy.